In today's video, we're going to learn how to solve the internal server 500 error on your website. Now, the 500 error might manifest in something like this. It means you won't be able to access your website. The front end, it can also happen on the back end. So sometimes you'll be able to access just the front end or just the back end or vice versa, or you might not be able to access both of them. And sometimes the error page will look like this, but it also can look like this or any of these pages. And they all mean the same thing, that something is wrong with your WordPress installation. Now, it can mean that something is wrong on the actual files of your installation, or sometimes it might mean that something is wrong with your hosting environment or the server and some other environment that you have no control over. And the error 500 is not a single error. That means it can mean multiple things. Now, obviously, when you see 500, you assume that it's just one error, but let me share an example with you. So this is the blog post where the error 500 or the specifications of the error 500 are explained in a more granular manner. Now, this is obviously for the Microsoft Internet Information Services. That's the Microsoft server, but most websites or most commercial hosts use Nginx or Nginx, whatever you like to call it, or the Apache server. So those servers do not give any of these details. But just because the details are not present doesn't mean the error is singular. It just means that we won't be able to find out what the error code is or the specific reason the error is occurring without having to do some investigation for ourselves. So coming back to the error, as I mentioned, that it can happen on the front end of the website, it can happen to the back end of the website, or sometimes both. And we'll try to incorporate solutions that work for both. That means if you don't have access to the backend, I'll try to give some solutions that work for both of them. Now, as I explained, the error 500 can happen for a variety of reasons. So sometimes the error will happen for reasons that are under your control. Sometimes it will be a plugin conflict, which we'll talk about. Sometimes it can be corrupt files or permissions, which we'll look at solutions. But sometimes the error can happen on your hosting provider or your server, actual server, physical server, or virtual server that your website is hosted on. And in rare cases, the DNS issues can also cause this error to happen. And in those cases, even if you try everything, it might not be possible to solve the issue. And ultimately, what you'll have to do is contact your hosting provider and ask them to solve the issue for you, or just wait till the time that they solve the issue. So just putting it out there that even if you follow all these solutions or all the methods that we describe, it might not be possible to solve the issue because the issue is not something that you can have or you have control over. Now, with that out of the way, let's start with the solutions of the problem. But before that, I would highly recommend that you take a complete backup of your website. Now, if you have access to the backend, I would recommend that you install a plugin like Updraft Plus and just make sure that you have a latest backup, either download it to your computer or use the free integration with Google Drive or other cloud providers and upload the latest backup to any of these services so that you always have a working solution or a specific instance or snapshot of your website, so that if any changes you make do not solve the issue, at least you can roll back to the previous issues. And if you don't have access to the backend of the server or your website and you can't install any plugins, then what you can do is ask your hosting provider, and even if they can't solve the issue, just ask them to take a most recent backup or just confirm if they have a recent working backup of your website so that you can make changes freely. So let's start with the solutions to the problem. The first solution that I would like you to check for is a corrupt htacess file. Now, if you don't know what an htacess file is, then don't worry about it. You don't need to understand why or how it exists or where it exists. You just need to know what to do. So there are two ways to go about it. If you have access to the backend, then you can make changes or look for the corrupt file inside the backend using a plugin, which I'll mention in a second. But you can also use an FTP client. Now, the FTP client that we recommend that you use is FileZilla. It's a free tool that you can use on your website. And what you'll have to do is download this for either Windows or for the platform that supports your operating system. And then you'll have to get in touch with your host to provide you some credentials on how to actually connect your website with the FTP client. So it's usually a host name that usually is the name of your website or the domain name of your website with a username and a password. So just get in touch with your host and they'll provide you this information. And if you have access to the backend of your website, as I can see or I can show you I have, then what you can do is install a file manager plugin. And what that allows you to do is just look at the files of your WordPress installation right inside WordPress. And it's a little more convenient in my opinion. So let me search for a file manager plugin. And as you can see, you have a bunch of different options to choose from. The File Manager plugin, Filebird, WordPress Real Media Library, and Advanced File Manager. And I've tried some of these plugins, and all of them offer a similar functionality. And for the functionality that specifically we are looking for, any of these plugins will work fine, and they are highly rated plugins. So just go for the most popular one if that's something that you're concerned about. So I'll install this plugin, and let's install the plugin, and I'll show you what to do next. Once the plugin is installed and activated, you'll see a new entry inside the WordPress menu, which is WP File Manager. And you can just click on it or go to the WP File Manager entry right here. All right, this is the interface of the plugin, and you might get some notices for subscription and also rating the plugin. I just close those, and you can do the same thing. And most important part is that we are inside the directory on our website, and this is what our website actually looks like. For people or for you, if you haven't used or if you didn't know how a WordPress website looks like, it's just a collection of files and folders, and this is what it looks like. And look at the file. This is the file we're talking about. It's the htacess file. Now, as I mentioned, you can do the same thing or access these directories using FTP as well. But if you don't know how FTP works, or if you find it complicated, you can use cPanel on your website inside your admin area of your hosting provider. And most hosting providers do give cPanel, but even if they don't give cPanel access, then they have some way to access the files of your website. Just ask your hosting provider if that is possible, so you won't have to work with FTP. But that's something you should look at. And so coming here, what you need to do is actually look at this file. You don't have to do it, or you don't have to actually open the file and look at it. All you have to do is right click and just rename the file, just as you would do on your computer. And what we can rename it to something like, let's say, old. Just make sure that the htacess file's name is something apart from just htacess, so that WordPress won't be able to recognize that the file actually exists. And once that is done, just wait for a few seconds, and the changes, as you can see, the rename files are being done. And once it's done, the renaming is done. And what you can do is now go to the permalink settings inside WordPress. So I'll go here, go to permalinks. And inside, you don't have to make any changes. All you have to do is just click Save Changes, and this should fix the htacess file. All right, the structure is updated. Now try to access the front end of your website. And if it's working, then you have successfully solved the problem of the error 500. Now, just because you solve this problem using the corrupt htacess file doesn't mean it's a permanent solution, because the htacess file got corrupt for a particular reason. So you have to try to find out what causes the issue. And even if you don't want to go that rabbit hole, then what you can observe is that if this error actually occurs once again in the future. And if it does, then it's worth the time to start investigating into looking at alternative root causes on why this is happening in the first place. And some of the other solutions that we'll be looking at might also help in eliminating the problem completely. So I'll just suggest you watch the complete video and just follow along the rest of the tutorial as well, so that you have some ideas if this error occurs again on your website. Now, coming to solution number 2, that would be to deactivate all the plugins on your website. So let me show you how to do it in a variety of ways. Obviously, if you have access to the backend of your website, you can just go into the plugins menu. And all you have to do is just select all the plugins, just go to deactivate and just click apply. And all the plugins will be deactivated on your website. Now, the reason we are doing this is because sometimes a conflict in one of the plugins or multiple plugins try to access the same resources, and it might cause issues on your website. And that's why we're trying to find out if the plugin is the root cause of the issue. And if this fixes your problem, then we can take an alternative approach. And going to the FTP approach, once again, let me show you how to do it via FTP or cPanel again. So this is how the FTP server with specifically FileZilla should look like. And as you can see, I'm connected to my server right now, and I am inside the specific directory called public HTML. Under that, there are multiple directories. Let me show you in a second. You have WP admin, WP content, and WP includes. And this is the same directory where the htacess file is presented. So depending on your server, this area or this path will be different, so don't worry about that. Just make sure that you're in the directory where these directories are visible, and it should be in the public HTML directory. And you have to do, or what you have to do, is go into the WP content folder, and you will find a plugin folder inside it. It is a folder. So all you have to do is rename the folder once again, similar to what you did. Just right click and rename it, and make sure that you add some modifier to it, just like old or backup, so that the plugin's directory's name is actually changed. And what that will do is achieve the same thing. What we'll do is actually disable all the plugins on the website. And what you can do is actually just once you've made the change, you can go back to the FTP server and just make the name or change the name once again to the plugins itself. Because in WordPress, once you change the name of the directory and just even if you rename it back instantly, all the plugins are actually deactivated. So this will achieve the same thing. So that was how you can do it with the FTP. And now what you have to do, this is the important step. This is the solution part. You have to activate individual plugins one by one. So I'll maybe activate this plugin, then I'll activate this plugin, then I'll activate this plugin. And as soon as I find a problem, as soon as I start seeing the error 500, I can estimate that, or I can reasonably assume that all the plugins that I've already activated, one of the plugins is causing, or one or more plugins is causing the issue in that. And then what I can do is try to deactivate one or two plugins and find out if one or two plugins in combination are causing the issue. And then once you find the culprit plugin, just make sure that you don't use it, or contact the developer and tell them about the issue and ask them if they have a fix on hand, and avoid the plugin if you can for the timing, at least till the time the error is resolved. Now, coming to solution number 3, or approach number 3, is to increase your memory limit. Now, hopefully this approach does solve the problem for you and you find the culprit plugin that was causing the issue in the first place. But in rare cases, what can happen is it might not be a plugin issue, but it might be a theme issue as well. That's a rare case, but we're trying to grab at straws here and see if any solution works. So what I would recommend that you also try, if you don't find a solution with this problem or this approach, is to revert to the default WordPress theme during the, I would say, during the diagnosis of this problem. So all you have to do is go to Appearance, go to Themes, and just revert or activate any of the 2020 themes. Now, if the theme is not installed, the 2020 themes, if you've deleted them, just install them using the Add New button. And for FTP users, or for users who don't have admin access to their websites, let me show you what they need to do. Now, coming to the FTP solution, we'll use a similar approach that we used for the plugins directory, but slightly different. So what you would do, instead of renaming the plugins directory, which deactivated all the plugins, you'll go inside the themes directory in the same directory. So public HTML, WP content, and inside we'll go into the themes folder, and you'll find all the themes that are actually installed on your website. And what you'll have to do is just make sure that whatever theme is currently active on your website, just rename the folder to something else. So for example, I have the Astro theme installed. So what I'll do is just right click and go to rename, and just add some old or backup to it so that the plugins or the theme's name is actually different. And what will happen is WordPress, once it detects this change, will automatically revert to one of the default themes. So make sure that it's installed and also present on the server. Now, once that happens, try to access your website if it is actually working. And if it does, then it might also be a theme issue. And if you could not access your website once all the plugins were deactivated, but you can access the theme or your website after your theme was deactivated, then what you can try to do is activate all your plugins and just revert to the default theme and see if it works. And if that does work, then by just process of elimination, you can identify, or you can just tell that the theme is the cause of the issue. Once again, the theme is rarely a cause of the issue, but just putting it out there, it might be a cause of the issue. And that's why I just wanted to include it in this video as well. Now, coming to the next solution, what we'll try to do is increase the PHP memory limit. And the way to do it is very simple. All you have to do is open up a text file and just enter something in it and just save it. Let me show you what I mean. So open up your favorite notepad or any text editor. I'm using Notepad++, but you can use Notepad as well. Just make sure that you're creating an empty file. Just include these terms or this specific code or code snippet in it. Just write memory equals 128 megabytes. Now, 128 megabytes is something that I have decided. It's not something that is sure shot to solve the problem, but 128 megabytes is usually a decent amount of memory to work with, and it should most of the time be sufficient. And once you've included or added this bit of code into the file, just make sure to save it as php.ini. Just make sure that the name is php.ini and save it in a location that you can easily find it. And once you've done that, let's move on to the actual procedure on how to actually replace this file on your website setup. So what I'm going to do is go to the plugins menu once again, and I'll activate the file manager plugin because that's what I'm going to use to upload the file. So I'll activate it and I'll go to the file manager. Now what you have to do is upload the file to the WP admin folder. This is the folder I'm talking about. If you use FTP, the process is the same. Just go into the WP admin folder of your website. Inside the folder, you'll find a bunch of different files, and all you have to do is upload the php.inf file that we just created to this folder. Now, depending on the kind of plugin you actually use, the procedure might be different, or the button that you use to upload the file might be different. So just make sure to hover over the buttons, and usually they'll tell you how to upload the files. For this plugin, this is the icon I have to click, which says upload files. And what I can do is drag and drop the files, or also select the files or folders from my computer. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to open the File Explorer, and I'm going to navigate to the actual folder where I placed the file. So as you can see, it's under 500 error, the php.inf file. Now extension is not being visible because that's a Windows setting, but the extension is still in place. I'll just double click the file, and it'll start uploading on your computer, and this is what you should see. And next, once this is done, just go to the front end of the website and see if your website is being accessible, or you can access your website. And if you can access your website, then most likely PHP was running out of memory, and by increasing the limit, you have eliminated the problem. Now, even after following all these solutions, you can't still access your website and still throwing errors, then you can move on to the next solution, that is increasing or resetting the permissions of the files and folders on your website. And what that means is that every file and folder that you have on your website has certain permissions. As you can see, you have permissions right here, and every file and folder has permissions. And WordPress recommends certain permissions that you should set, and sometimes depending on the installation, or maybe a plugin change or something changed, and WordPress isn't able to access some of the files and folders, or your server is not able to access some of the files and folders. And what we're going to do is reset the permissions to the optimal levels, and then it should solve the problem. Now, this approach only works with FTP or cPanel because most of the plugins do not have the permissions to actually change permissions. You can actually view the permissions, but you won't be able to change it. So let me show you how it's done by opening up the FTP client. So for FTP users, this is how the permissions would look like. If you paid any attention to the previous examples that are showing the FTP, the permissions were right here. And as you can see, probably the permissions in the FTP client look quite different from what you saw in the plugins. And depending on the FTP client you use, it might show something different. But you don't need to worry about what this means. Let me tell you the ideal settings and what folders you need to change. So what you have to do is select the WP admin and WP content folders. Just make sure that you're pressing Control or Command on your computer or your keyboard, and select both of these. Right click, go to File Permissions, and make sure that the permissions are actually set to 755. Now, as you can see, the permissions right now in my setup are set to 775, which is not bad, but usually the permission will be caused, or the 500 error issue will be caused by a permission that is set to a much lower number. So what I'd recommend is that you set it to 755 like this, and just press the OK button. And you don't need to enable this option because we're going to change the permissions for some internal directories as well. So I'm just going to press OK, and this might take some time to do. And as you can see, the operation is now successful. So what I'm going to do is go to the content folder as well. So I'm going to go inside, and I'm going to select 3 folders. I'm going to select themes, plugins, and uploads. So let me look at or find the plugins, uploads, themes, and plugins. I'm going to do the same thing here as well. I'm going to set the permissions to 755. So right click, File Permissions, 755. Okay. Now you've changed the permission of the directories, and you will also need to change the permission of some files. So what I'd recommend is go back one level, back to the actual root folder, and select all the files, including htacess and all the other files. So just maybe you can press Control or Command A and just deselect the files and folders that you don't want to use. So license and readme are not very important, but rest of the WordPress core files are now selected. And right click, go to permissions, and make sure that the permission is actually set to 644, and just press OK once again. Let the process complete, and you should be fine. And hopefully this will solve your problem. And if this does not solve your problem, once again, you have some other solutions to work with. Let's talk about them once again. Now, coming to the last solution, sometimes the problem can be caused by a corrupt WordPress installation. That means one or more of these files is actually corrupt. So no matter what permissions we change, or no matter what we do, it won't solve the issue. So what you can do is actually replace the contents of certain files and folders inside WordPress. Now, fair bit of warning, this is not something that I'd recommend you do yourself. I would recommend that you contact your host to do so. And it's easy to mess it up if especially you're not experienced with using WordPress. But I'll just show you the process on how to do it, and make sure you have backups in place anytime, every time. And do not do this if you don't feel comfortable making these changes on your server. So let me show you how to do it. So step number one would be to download the complete WordPress installation once again on your computer. Just go to wordpress.org and click this button right here which says Get WordPress. And once you're on this page, just click this button right here, download WordPress 5.6, and WordPress in a zip file should be downloaded on your computer. I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to download it once again, and I'll show you what to do in the next steps. Once the zip file is downloaded, just make sure to place it somewhere on a computer that you can remember, something like this. And we'll need to extract the zip file and extract the contents of the zip file. So I already have a utility installed for extracting or doing that, but you can find plenty of utilities like WinZip, WinRAR, or 7-Zip to do this. I'm going to use a 7-Zip. So what I'm going to do is go to 7-Zip and I'm going to say extract here. And this might take some time, and it'll create a new directory called WordPress. Once the process is finished, we'll proceed to the next step. So after the extraction, just open your FileZilla or any other FTP client that you're using, and on the left hand side, open the local directory where you have downloaded the WordPress files. I have it open right here. And on the right hand side, obviously you'll need to open the root directory of your server. And you can see the similarities. Obviously you can see the same files here and here, because these are the files that you use or on a blank WordPress install, and these are your actual server files. And what we're going to do is replace a couple of folders on your actual website. So if there are any corrupt files, they should be taken care of, and the 500 error should be resolved if this is the cause of the problem. So what you need to do is select only two folders, which is the WP admin folder and WP includes folder. You'll replace only these two folders, not the content folder. Otherwise it will also mess up with your plugins, your themes, and your customization. So only the admin folder and the includes folder. And obviously we've already ruled out most of the issues with the plugins and themes, hopefully at this stage, so there's no need to replace these files. So what you're going to do is just select by pressing Control Command and just dragging and dropping them right here in the root directory. All you also can do is just right click and click the upload button, and they'll start instantly uploading here. And make sure to overwrite any of the files and just let the process finish. And it might take some time because there are approximately 1200 or so files, and make sure the connection is live and you don't close the FTP client. And once the process is complete, just go back to your website. And once you're inside your website, just try and see if you can access your website. I already have my website open up a new tab, so I'll switch to it. And as you can see now, I can actually access my website perfectly. So hopefully one of these solutions actually works for you and you're able to resolve the 500 error on your website. And as I mentioned, sometimes it's not under your control. You might have to contact your host even after following all these solutions. And if one of the solutions actually worked for you, make sure to leave the solution in the comments so others can also know about the solution that worked for you. And if it didn't, now the solutions worked, then also mention that in the comments, and we'll try to see if we can find some other ways we can resolve this issue. And if you like this kind of content, make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you want to see amazing content about WordPress and related topics. Once again, you are watching Brainstorm Forces YouTube channel. My name is Yuvraj and I hope to see you in the next one. Till then, take care, stay safe.